Hello and welcome to Andrew's Game Display. I'm Andrew, and today for the first display video, we're just going to be looking over various things that I have plans on doing display videos on in the future. So it's not going to be a real review today. We're just going to be looking at various things that I think we'll touch on at some point. So first, and what I'll probably do next week, is we're going to have a look at my favorite console, the Nintendo Entertainment System. Yes. My parents actually had this when I was born, and I have no idea what age I started playing video games at, but I started with this and it's been my favorite ever since. Along with that, we're also going to look at its Japanese counterpart, the Famicom. Yes, surprising that there's actually a lot to talk about this, and a lot of things that a lot of people might not know about it. Also, we're going to be talking about some of my favorite NES games. Yes, Star Tropics. There's a lot to say about this one, especially a little touch that a lot of games from that time didn't really have. It really had a unique thing that nothing else really did at the time. Another thing we're going to look at, multi-carts. Yes, you never know. Can you see that? 190 in one. You never know what kind of interesting games you're going to find on these things. Another thing we're going to look at, it's heavy as heck, the Vectrex. Yes, one of the very first consoles that actually have a screen built in. Well, I mean, maybe one of the only consoles to have a screen built in, actually. It's really neat. A lot of interesting games for that. And I'm sure at some point we'll look at one of my favorite consoles, the Neo Geo. And it's a console that's famous for having some of the biggest cartridges for their games, and it's so big it has to have 2 boards at the bottom instead of just one. I'm pretty sure it's the only console that has that. And maybe at some point we'll get to this game. Oh boy. Maybe not. Guess we'll see. Something I'm sure I'll touch on at some point is the Action Max, the first real action game system. And by that it means it's the first system that actually plays games with VHS tapes. And you can probably tell by that the fact that VHS tapes can only go one way, that these games are linear and probably not that much fun. Another thing we'll probably look at some point is Rob, one of the accessories that came out originally with the NES, and he's not that exciting despite his pretty awesome look. We'll have a look at him. Another thing we'll look at, Turbo Duo, along with the TurboGrafx 16 and the PC Engine counterparts, released in other parts of the world. Also some of my favorite consoles, along with the Neo Geo and NES. I'm sure we'll have a look at that. And of course, other than just the Famicom, we'll also look at some other foreign consoles, including the Japanese Dreamcast and its crazy box art. I mean, look at that. This guy, he's pretty happy. I don't want to know why he's hiding behind his desk in that top right one, though. Not exactly sure what the story behind that one is. Also, another thing we'll look at is, if I can lift it up, the Miracle Piano for various consoles, including the NES, Super NES, and Genesis, although we will be looking at the NES version if we do touch on that. Whew, it's a lot of lifting. Another thing we'll be looking at, the PlayStation 1. No, actually, we'll be looking at fake consoles, because when we open the lid, we see it doesn't actually play PlayStation games. So there's a lot of weird things like that. I think we'll have a look at that. And one more thing I'm sure we'll touch on, obscure consoles like the Leisure Vision, and other old things like you might not have seen. So probably touch on things like Atari 2600, 5200, 7800, ColecoVision and Television, Odyssey, a whole bunch of old things like that. I'm sure we'll probably get to at some point to have a look at. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of other things we're going to have a look at too. That case back there, it's full of Game & Watches, so I'm sure we'll touch on those at some point for sure. And, of course, if there's anything else you see, I'm sure I'm forgetting a ton of stuff. Just leave your suggestions in the comments. But yeah, so this week, it's really just an overview of what we're going to be looking at. Some of my favorite things. Like I said, NES, my favorite console. And Star Tropics, my favorite game for it. So I actually have quite a bit to say about this, including the mysterious letter that comes packaged with it that back then people didn't realize you actually had to use it as part of the game. But I'm sure we'll talk about that next week. So thanks for watching. No, I didn't talk about too much this week. Don't worry, I promise the weeks to come will be a lot more exciting as we talk about some things that hopefully you've never seen or heard about before. So hopefully it's interesting, and of course, if you have any suggestions for things that you'd like me to talk about that I didn't mention here, even though, I mean, this definitely isn't it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I still want to get to at some point. But if you do have suggestions, please leave them in the comments, and I'll be sure to tell you what I think of them. And I'm sure they'll be fine, as if I have it here. I don't see why I can't review it or talk about it on the show. So thanks again for watching. This has been my first display video, not too eventful, but hopefully insightful on what we're going to be doing in the future, and thanks again for watching. I hope to see you next time.